The rain hammered against Sarah Mitchell's windshield as she pulled into the cracked parking lot of what used to be the Riverside Power Plant. Her daughter, Emma, 7 years old with tangled brown hair and eyes too knowing for her age, pressed her face against the back window, breath fogging the glass. "Mommy, it looks scary." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel of their 15-year-old Honda, the check engine light glowing like a warning she'd learned to ignore months ago. Everything looks scary these days. The eviction notice taped to their apartment door 3 weeks ago. The final disconnection warning from the electric company. The pharmacy bill for Emma's asthma medication that kept climbing higher than Sarah's weekly paycheck from the diner. "It's not scary, baby," Sarah lied, staring at the hulking structure before them. "It's an adventure." The power plant loomed against the gray October sky like a monument to abandonment. Rust bled down its concrete walls in orange streaks. Windows gaped broken and dark, their glass long since shattered by vandals or time. Chain-link fencing sagged around the perimeter, torn in places where nature had begun reclaiming what industry had stolen. The massive smokestack, once belching progress into the sky, now stood silent and accusing, cracked near the top like a broken finger pointing at heaven. Sarah killed the engine, and the sudden silence fell heavy. She could hear Emma's breathing in the back seat, slightly wheezy. They were running low on the inhaler. Another problem on a list that never stopped growing. "Can we go home?" Emma asked quietly. "Home?" The word twisted in Sarah's chest. They didn't have a home anymore. Not really. The apartment they'd been renting for 3 years belonged to someone else now, someone who could actually pay the rent on time. Their belongings, what little remained after selling everything that wasn't essential, sat packed in 6 cardboard boxes in a storage unit Sarah was 2 months behind on paying for. This place, this decaying ruin that no one wanted, was the closest thing to home they had left. "This is home now, sweetheart," Sarah said, trying to inject warmth into words that felt like stones. "We're going to fix it up. Make it beautiful." She could see Emma's reflection in the rearview mirror, the doubt written across her small face. Kids knew when adults were pretending. They could smell fear the way animals could smell fire. Sarah opened her door and stepped out into the cold drizzle. The air smelled of rust and rotting leaves. Broken asphalt crunched under her worn sneakers as she walked around to let Emma out. Her daughter clutched a stuffed rabbit, missing one ear, a survivor from better days. Together they approached the main entrance, past a faded sign that read, "Riverside Power Generation Facility. Authorized personnel only." Someone had spray-painted over it years ago. Crude word Sarah was grateful Emma couldn't read yet. The auction had been last month. Sarah had gone on impulse, driven by a desperate hope she couldn't quite name. She'd seen the listing online, buried among foreclosures and estate sales. Historic industrial property, as is, no warranty. The starting bid was $500. She'd sat in the back of the auction room, surrounded by real estate investors in crisp suits and contractors with calculating eyes. They'd laughed when the auctioneer described the property. Condemned for structural issues, asbestos concerns, environmental cleanup required. Buyer assumes all liability. Everyone had walked away. Everyone except Sarah. With shaking hands, she'd raise her number and bid $900. Everything she'd saved from 3 months of double shifts. Everything that was supposed to go toward first and last month's rent somewhere, anywhere. The auctioneer's gavel had come down with a sound like a door closing. Sold to bidder 47. Her sister Rachel had called her insane. "You bought a death trap with your last $900? Sarah, what were you thinking?" Sarah hadn't been thinking. She'd been drowning, and when you're drowning, you grab at anything that floats. Her mother had been worse. "This is exactly why you're in this mess. Always making impulsive decisions, never thinking about consequences. That child needs stability, Sarah, and not some fantasy about fixing up a condemned building." Even Marcus, her ex-husband, had managed to send a text dripping with vindication. "Guess I was right about your judgment. Good luck explaining this to Emma when you're both sleeping in a car." Sarah pushed open the heavy metal door. It groaned on rusted hinges, and the sound echoed through the empty space beyond. The entrance hall stretched before them, a cavern of shadow and decay. Graffiti covered the walls in layers, years of trespassers leaving their marks. Broken ceiling tiles hung like wounded birds. Water damage stained everything a uniform gray-brown. "Stay close to me," Sarah said, taking Emma's hand. They moved deeper into the building, their footsteps crunching on debris. Sarah pulled out the flashlight she'd bought at the dollar store, its weak beam cutting through the gloom. Every room they entered told the same story of neglect and abandonment. The control room still held ancient panels studded with buttons and gauges, most of them stripped for scrap metal. The break room had tables bolted to the floor, chairs long gone. Someone had built a fire in one corner, leaving a black scar on the concrete. Emma stayed pressed against her side, quiet in the way that meant she was scared but trying to be brave. Sarah's heart ached. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to be brave about her home being a ruin. They climbed the metal stairs to the second level, each step testing Sarah's faith. The structure groaned around them, settling, breathing with age. She tried not to think about the inspector's report she'd received after the purchase, the one that outlined 50 different code violations and estimated $250,000 in repairs before the building would be remotely habitable. $250,000. She had $17 in her checking account. "Mommy, I'm cold," Emma said. "I know, baby. We'll set up the space heater in a bit." They'd been living out of the car for the past week, parking behind the diner where Sarah worked, sneaking into the employee bathroom to wash up. The manager had started asking questions. Sarah could see it in her eyes, that mixture of pity and discomfort, the look people got when they were about to have to choose between kindness and convenience. She told herself they'd move into the power plant as soon as she cleaned out a room, made it safe. But every room was worse than the last. Broken glass, collapsed sections, water pooling in corners. This wasn't a home. This was a disaster with a deed. The administrative level was in slightly better condition. Sarah found what had once been offices, rooms with remnants of desks and filing cabinets. One space near the back had a door that still closed, windows that were cracked but intact. She tested the floor carefully, checking for soft spots, weak boards. "This could work," she murmured. Emma looked around the room with hollow eyes. "There's no bed. We'll use our sleeping bags tonight. Tomorrow I'll see about getting a mattress." With what money? The question hung unspoken but deafening. Sarah set down the 2 bags she'd brought in from the car, everything they needed for tonight. Sleeping bags, a change of clothes for Emma, the space heater that would barely make a dent in the cold, a box of crackers, and a jar of peanut butter for dinner. "Can we go to Aunt Rachel's house?" Emma asked quietly. Rachel had made it clear that wasn't an option. "I love you both, but Derek and I can't take on that responsibility right now. We're trying for a baby ourselves. We need our space." Space. Everyone needed space except the people who had nowhere to go. "This is our adventure, remember?" Sarah said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "We're pioneers, exploring new territory. We're going to make this place amazing. You'll see." Emma nodded, but tears gathered in her eyes. "I miss our old house." "Me too, baby. Me too." They ate dinner sitting on the floor, the space heater humming weakly in the corner. Sarah had found an outlet that still worked, a small miracle. The peanut butter stuck in her throat, but she forced it down, smiling at Emma, pretending everything was fine. After Emma fell asleep in her sleeping bag, clutching her one-eared rabbit, Sarah sat with her back against the wall and let herself cry. Silent tears that felt like admitting defeat. She was 32 years old, a high school graduate with a semester of community college before she'd gotten pregnant. She'd worked her whole adult life, scraped and saved, done everything right, or tried to. And somehow she'd still ended up here, homeless with a child, squatting in a condemned building she'd bought with her last dollar. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "I hope you're being smart for once. That child deserves better than your mistakes." Sarah turned off her phone. Outside, rain continued to fall, pattering against broken windows, dripping through holes in the roof. The power plant creaked and settled around them. This massive shell that had once generated light for thousands of homes, now dark and dead. Sarah pulled the property deed from her bag, studying it in the flashlight's beam. The building took up nearly 2 acres. Industrial zoning. According to the documentation, it had been built in 1952, operated until 1987, then sat empty when the company relocated. Various owners had tried to redevelop it over the years, all failing, all walking away. Just like everyone walked away from Sarah. She tucked the deed back in her bag and lay down beside Emma, pulling the sleeping bag tight. The floor was hard, the cold seeping up through every layer. Somewhere in the building, wind whistled through a gap, creating a low moan that sounded almost human. Tomorrow she'd figure out what to do next. Tomorrow she'd make a plan. Tonight, she'd just survive. Sarah woke to sunlight struggling through dirty windows and Emma's cough rattling in the small room. She sat up quickly, her back screaming from sleeping on concrete. Emma was already awake, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, breathing in that tight, wheezy way that meant her asthma was acting up. "Let me get your inhaler," Sarah said, digging through the bag. The inhaler was nearly empty. Maybe 3 doses left. The prescription refill was waiting at the pharmacy, holding for payments Sarah couldn't make. The medication cost $140 without insurance, and Sarah's insurance had been tied to the job she'd lost 6 months ago when a restaurant closed. Emma took 2 puffs, and after a few minutes, her breathing eased. Sarah stroked her hair, hating herself for every choice that had led them here. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Emma said. They had crackers left and the peanut butter. Sarah made a mental inventory. $20 in her wallet, $160 in her savings account, which she needed to keep there, because if it dropped below $150, they'd charge her a fee she couldn't afford. The diner paid her in 2 days, $90 after taxes, and $40 of that had to go to the storage unit or they'd lose everything else they owned. "Let's have breakfast, and then we'll explore our new place," Sarah said with false cheer. "Who knows what we might find?" They ate dry crackers and shared a bottle of water. Emma asked about school, and guilt twisted in Sarah's stomach. Emma had missed 4 days already this month. Sarah kept meaning to re-enroll her after they'd moved districts, but she didn't have a permanent address yet, and the school would ask questions she couldn't answer. After breakfast, Sarah decided to truly explore the building. Maybe there was something she could salvage, sell, use. The place had to have some value beyond the land, even if it was just copper piping or old equipment. They started with the ground floor, moving methodically through each space. The loading dock had massive bay doors rusted shut. The maintenance shop still held workbenches and tool racks, most stripped clean, but a few wrenches and screwdrivers left behind. Sarah pocketed them. They might need them. The generator room was at the back of the building, a cavernous space that had once held the machines that powered everything. Now it was empty except for the massive concrete foundations where equipment had been bolted down. The walls were lined with pipes and conduits, most disconnected, leading nowhere. "Look, Mommy," Emma said, pointing to something in the corner. Sarah followed her gaze. Tucked behind a tangle of old pipes was a metal door, barely visible. She'd almost missed it, the way it blended into the industrial gray of everything else. She approached carefully, testing the floor for stability. The door was heavy steel, spotted with rust but solid. No handle, just a combination dial like an old safe. Sarah's heart quickened. An abandoned safe in an abandoned building. It probably contained nothing, or maybe old paperwork, maintenance records. But still, something about it called to her, awakened a tiny spark of hope in her chest. She tried the dial. It didn't budge. The mechanism was locked tight, probably rusted from decades of humidity. "Can you open it?" Emma asked. "I don't know the combination, baby." "Maybe there's treasure inside," Emma said with a child's optimism that made Sarah's throat tight. "Maybe," Sarah whispered. They spent the rest of the morning exploring, but Sarah's mind kept returning to that safe. It sat there in the generator room like a question mark, like possibility. She knew it was stupid to get her hopes up. Nothing good came from abandoned places. Nothing valuable stayed locked in buildings everyone forgot. But that night, after Emma fell asleep, Sarah lay awake thinking about the safe. Not because she believed it held anything, because it gave her something to focus on besides the crushing reality of her situation. A mystery, a distraction, a tiny shred of something that felt like forward motion instead of drowning. The next morning, she told Emma they were going on a treasure hunt. They returned to the generator room with the tools Sarah had found: a hammer, a screwdriver, a rusty pry bar. She had no idea what she was doing, but she needed to try something. She examined the dial more carefully in daylight. It was old, probably original to the building's construction. The faceplate was brass, tarnished green. Numbers circled the dial, 0 to 99. The mechanism looked complex, more sophisticated than a simple padlock. Sarah tried turning it both directions. The dial moved stiffly, grinding against internal rust. After several minutes of working it, the movement became smoother. But without the combination, she was just spinning in circles. "What if we never get it open?" Emma asked. "Then we don't," Sarah said. "But we'll try first." She spent hours working at it, trying random combinations, listening for clicks or changes in resistance. Emma played nearby, building structures from broken chunks of concrete, narrating elaborate stories about princesses and castles. Sarah's hands cramped. Sweat gathered despite the cold. This was pointless. This was desperation masquerading as purpose. But she kept going because stopping meant returning to the reality that she was squatting in a ruin with her daughter and no plan. Her phone buzzed. A text from the diner manager. "Hey, Sarah, I need to talk to you about your schedule. You've been late a lot lately. Is everything okay?" Everything wasn't okay. Sarah had been late because she'd been driving Emma to the library to use their bathroom to get them both cleaned up, and then circling back to pick up Emma before her shift, and the timing never worked right. She'd been distracted, exhausted, barely holding it together. She typed back, "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." But she knew what was coming. She'd seen that kind of message before, the polite precursor to being let go. They'd phrase it as concern, wrap it in kindness, but the result would be the same. She'd lose the one thread of income, keeping them from complete collapse. The dial slipped in her grip, and Sarah's frustration boiled over. She grabbed the pry bar and slammed it against the safe, once, twice, a third time. The metal clanged loudly in the empty room, and Emma looked up, startled. "Mommy!" Sarah stopped, breathing hard. Her hands shook. This wasn't her. She didn't break things. She didn't give up. She didn't. The safe clicked. Sarah froze. Had she imagined it? No. There was again a distinct mechanical sound from inside the safe. She'd hit it at just the right angle, jarred something loose. With trembling hands, she grabbed the wheel handle beside the dial and turned. At first, nothing. Then, with a groan of metal that hadn't moved in decades, the bolts began to slide back. "Emma," Sarah breathed. "Emma, I think it's opening." Her daughter scrambled over, eyes wide. Together they watched as Sarah pulled the heavy door. It resisted, hinges screaming, but finally swung wide. The interior was dark, deep. Sarah shined her flashlight inside. At first, she saw only metal shelves. Empty. Her heart sank. Of course it was empty. Why would anything be? Wait. There in the back. A canvas bag, sealed with tape yellowed by time. And beside it, metal boxes. Several of them. Industrial-looking containers, the kind designed to protect contents from moisture and damage. Sarah reached in with shaking hands and pulled out the canvas bag. It was heavy, unexpectedly so. She set it on the floor and carefully peeled away the tape. The fabric split easily, brittle with age. Inside were bundles. Stacks of them, wrapped in plastic, labeled with dates and amounts. Emma leaned closer. "What is it?" Sarah pulled out one bundle and held it up to the light. Through the plastic, she could see them clearly. Bills. $100 bills. Crisp, old, but unmistakably real. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. She tore open the plastic with trembling fingers. The money was real. She counted quickly. One bundle. $10,000. She counted again to be sure. $10,000 in one stack. And there were dozens of bundles in the bag. Sarah's vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. She looked at Emma, who stared at the money with wide eyes, not fully understanding, but sensing this was important. "Is it real, Mommy?" "I think so, baby. I think it's real." Sarah pulled out the metal boxes next. The first one opened to reveal documents, old stock certificates from companies she didn't recognize, bonds with dates from the 1950s and 60s, official-looking papers sealed in plastic sleeves. The second box held something else. Gold coins. Small, heavy, gleaming even through decades of storage. Sarah's hand shook so hard she nearly dropped them. The third box was filled with jewelry, pieces wrapped individually in cloth. A diamond necklace, rings set with stones that caught the light, a bracelet that looked antique, delicate, and valuable. Sarah sat back on her heels, staring at the contents of the safe spread before her. This wasn't possible. This didn't happen. People didn't just find fortunes in condemned buildings they bought for $900. "Mommy, are we rich now?" Emma asked. Sarah started to laugh, a sound that turned into a sob halfway through. She pulled Emma into her arms and held her tight. This small person who'd been so brave, so patient, so good through everything. "I don't know, baby," Sarah said. "But maybe we're going to be okay." They sat there for a long time, mother and daughter, surrounded by what looked like a miracle in the cold generator room of an abandoned power plant. The money was real. The coins were real. The bonds and certificates would need to be evaluated, but they looked legitimate. Sarah's mind spun. This was someone's hidden cash, stashed away decades ago and forgotten. Or maybe the owner had died before they could retrieve it. Maybe it had been hidden during the plant's operation. Secret funds squirreled away by someone who never came back. It didn't matter how it got there. It was here now, and Sarah had found it. She counted the cash first. 73 bundles of 10,000 each. $730,000 in old hundreds. Her hand shook so badly she had to count twice, then 3 times. $730,000. The gold coins, she didn't even know how to begin estimating their value. There had to be 24 of them, each heavy and solid. Thousands more, surely. The jewelry, the bonds, the stock certificates, all of it together. It was everything. Sarah sat with her back against the cold concrete wall, Emma curled in her lap, and stared at the pile of wealth scattered before them. Everything she needed, everything she'd prayed for desperately in the dark, every impossible hope she'd barely let herself feel. It was here. It had been here all along, waiting in the darkness of a building everyone else had thrown away. Just like her. "Mommy, you're crying," Emma said. "I'm happy, baby. These are happy tears." Emma seemed to accept this, resting her head on Sarah's shoulder. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the discovery settling around them. Finally, Sarah spoke. "We need to be smart about this, okay? We can't tell anyone yet. We need to figure out what to do." "Okay, Mommy." Sarah's mind began to turn over possibilities. The money would need to be verified, deposited slowly to avoid suspicion. The coins and jewelry could be appraised, sold through proper channels. The bonds and certificates would need to be researched, claimed if they had value. But first, they needed to secure everything. Hide it properly. And then, Sarah needed to think. She repacked the safe carefully, closing the door but not locking it. Tonight, they'd move everything to a better hiding spot. Tomorrow, Sarah would start making calls, finding people who could help her navigate this. But for now, for this moment, she let herself feel it. Relief, joy, hope. The crushing weight that had sat on her chest for months, slowly suffocating her, suddenly lifted. They were going to be okay. More than okay. Emma would have everything she needed. Medicine, clothes that fit, school, a real home. Sarah would make sure of it. She'd be careful, smart, patient. She wouldn't blow this chance. She wouldn't let this miracle slip away. Outside, the sky was darkening, evening approaching. Sarah and Emma gathered their things, preparing to spend another night on the cold floor. But it felt different now. The power plant wasn't a ruin anymore. It wasn't a monument to Sarah's failure. It was the place where everything changed, where fortune finally found them, where the woman everyone had counted out had somehow, impossibly won. Sarah Mitchell fell asleep that night, with her daughter safe beside her and hope burning in her chest like a light that would never go out. The next morning began like the ones before it, cold concrete and Emma's coughing, but Sarah's mind buzzed with electricity. The safe contents were real. She checked 3 more times in the middle of the night, convinced she'd hallucinated the whole thing. But no, the canvas bag sat exactly where she'd left it, heavy with possibility. She fed Emma the last of their crackers and drove to the public library as soon as it opened. Emma settled in the children's section with picture books while Sarah claimed a computer in the back corner, her heart hammering. She started with the currency. A search revealed that old $100 bills, depending on their series and condition, could be worth more than face value to collectors. But even at face value, she had $730,000. The number looked fake typed on the screen. Next, the gold coins. She'd photographed one secretly. Based on the images she found online, they appeared to be American Eagle gold coins, common enough that they could be sold without too much scrutiny. Current gold prices put each one somewhere around $2,000. 24 coins. 48,000. The jewelry was harder to assess without professional help. The diamonds looked real, clear, and brilliant even in flashlight glow. Conservative guess? Another 100,000, maybe more. Then the bonds and stock certificates. This was where things got complicated. Some of the companies still existed, their stocks split and restructured over decades. Others had gone bankrupt or been absorbed. Sarah would need help from a financial advisor, a lawyer, someone who knew how to navigate claims on old securities. But even conservative math showed her sitting on close to $1 million. Probably more, possibly a lot more. Sarah sat back in the library chair, hands trembling. This was real. This was happening. After everything, every humiliation, every night spent crying quietly so Emma wouldn't hear, every time she'd beg for extensions on bills or scrape together change for gas. After all of that, her phone buzzed. The diner manager. Sarah, can you come in early today? We need to talk. Sarah's stomach clenched. Here it came. The firing she'd been expecting. The final domino falling. Except this time, it didn't matter. She had insurance now. Time. Options. She didn't need to panic. She typed back. I'll be there at noon. Emma looked up from her books. Are we going to Aunt Rachel's for lunch? Rachel, who'd said no when Sarah needed her. Who'd made her feel like a burden, an embarrassment, a cautionary tale. Rachel, who'd spent the last month posting photos on Facebook of her remodeled kitchen and weekend getaway to wine country. Not today, baby, Sarah said. We got things to do. Their first stop was the bank. Not Sarah's usual bank, where her account hovered perpetually at minimum balance. A different bank, bigger, the kind with marble floors and private meeting rooms. The kind where people with money went. Sarah walked in with Emma holding her hand and $20,000 cash in her purse. 20 bundles she'd pulled from the canvas bag that morning. Her heart raced. Will they question her? Call the police? Accuse her of something? The lobby was nearly empty, quiet except for the soft ding of teller computers. A woman in a navy suit approached them, her smile professional and distant. Can I help you? I'd like to open an account, Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. And I need to make a cash deposit. The woman's expression flickered when Sarah said cash, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Of course. I'm Jennifer, the branch manager. Come with me. In a private office that smelled like expensive furniture polish, Sarah pulled out the 20 bundles. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly. This is $20,000, Sarah said. I found it in a property I recently purchased, an old power plant. It was hidden in a safe that hadn't been opened in decades. She decided honesty was the best approach. Mostly honest, anyway. If she tried to be too clever, she'd mess something up. Jennifer recovered her composure. I see. Well, we'll need to file a currency transaction report for anything over $10,000. Standard procedure. Do you have identification? Sarah provided her license, social security card, the property deed. Jennifer made copies, typed information into her computer. The process took almost an hour. Emma fidgeted in her chair, bored, while Sarah sat rigid, waiting for sirens, accusations, something to go wrong. But nothing went wrong. Jennifer simply processed the deposit, explained that holds might be placed on large amounts until everything cleared, and handed Sarah temporary checks and an ATM card. Your account is open, Ms. Mitchell. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Sarah's throat was dry. I may need to speak with someone about investments. Financial planning. I'm expecting to have more funds available soon. Of course. I'll have our wealth management team reach out to you. Jennifer's smile warmed considerably. Money, Sarah was learning, changed how people looked at you. They left the bank with a receipt showing a balance of $20,000. Sarah stared at it in the car, the numbers solid and undeniable. This was step one. Legitimate deposit. Paper trail established. Now she could do the rest carefully, methodically. At the diner, Sarah's manager, Diane, sat across from her in the back booth, her expression careful and kind. The kindness hurt more than anger would have. "Sarah, I've noticed you've been struggling lately. Coming in late, distracted. I know things have been hard for you." "I'm sorry," Sarah started, but Diane held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've tried to be understanding, but the other girls have complained. It's not fair to them to cover your shifts when you're unreliable. And I've got corporate breathing down my neck about labor costs." Here it came. Sarah braced herself. "I'm going to have to let you go," Diane said softly. "I'm sorry. You're a good waitress when you're present, but I can't keep making excuses. I'll pay you through the week, but I need you to turn in your apron." 2 days ago, this would have destroyed Sarah. The loss of her only income, the final proof that she was failing at everything. But today, she simply nodded. "I understand." Diane looked surprised by her calm reaction. "I really am sorry. If things stabilize for you, come back and talk to me. Maybe we can." "Thank you for the opportunity," Sarah said, standing. She pulled off her apron and handed it over. "I appreciate everything you did for me." She walked out of that diner with her head up, Emma's hand in hers. The job that had barely kept them afloat was gone, and she felt lighter than she had in months. That afternoon, Sarah drove to a jeweler 3 towns over, somewhere nobody knew her. She brought a single ring from the safe, a plain gold band set with a small but clear diamond. Not the most valuable piece, but nice enough to test the waters. The jeweler, an older man with a magnifying loupe perched on his forehead, examined the ring carefully. Art Deco style. Good quality stone, about half a carat. Clean clarity. The setting is 14-karat gold. "What's it worth?" Sarah asked. "I could give you $1,500 for it. Retail would be closer to $3,000, but I have to resell." Sarah thought about negotiating, then decided against it. $1,500 for one ring. She had 9 more pieces easily worth the same or more. "I'll take it," she said. He counted out the money, 15 crisp hundreds, and Sarah tucked them into her purse. Another step. More money converted to spendable cash without raising alarms. She was getting the hang of this. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah worked methodically. She opened accounts at 3 different banks, depositing the old hundreds in amounts just under the reporting threshold. She visited different jewelry stores and pawn shops, selling pieces one at a time, never going to the same place twice. She researched numismatists and arranged to sell the gold coins through a reputable dealer who asked minimal questions and paid fair prices. The bonds and stock certificates required more help. Sarah hired a lawyer, a young woman fresh from law school who needed clients badly enough not to judge Sarah's situation too harshly. Together, they worked through the documentation, filing claims, tracking down successor companies, navigating the bureaucracy of financial recovery. Some of the bonds were worthless, companies long defunct with no surviving obligations. But others had value, sometimes surprising value. Bonds that had cost $50 in 1960 had matured and compounded over decades. One batch alone was worth $80,000. The stock certificates were a similar mix. Dead companies and shocking wins. One defunct mining operation had been bought by a conglomerate whose stock had split 3 times. Sarah's 200 shares purchased in 1965 had become 6,000 shares worth $47 each. The lawyer looked at her with something like awe. "Ms. Mitchell, once everything clears, you're looking at somewhere around $2.6 million. Sarah had to ask her to repeat it. $2.6 million. Give or take, depending on final evaluations and fees. $2.6 million. Sarah drove back to the power plant in a daze. Emma was staying with a neighbor she'd hired for babysitting, a kind elderly woman who didn't ask too many questions and was thrilled to earn $40 for an afternoon. The power plant looked different now. Still broken, still decaying, but no longer suffocating. Sarah walked through the generator room, where the safe stood empty now, its treasures redistributed to banks and investment accounts and safety deposit boxes. She'd bought this place for $900. Everyone thought she was crazy. Her own family had mocked her, pitted her, written her off as another in a long line of bad decisions. And she'd found nearly $3 million hidden in its walls. Sarah sat on the concrete floor, back against the same wall where she'd cried that first night, and started laughing. It bubbled up from somewhere deep, uncontrolled and borderline hysterical. She laughed until tears ran down her face, until her stomach ached, until the sound echoed through the empty building like a prayer of gratitude. The safe had held more than money. It had held proof that she wasn't cursed, wasn't doomed, wasn't fundamentally broken. Sometimes the universe gave back. Sometimes the desperate gamble paid off. Sometimes the person everyone bet against won. Sarah's phone rang. Rachel. She'd been avoiding her sister's calls, not ready to deal with judgment or advice or whatever backhanded help Rachel might offer. But today, feeling generous with her good fortune, Sarah answered. Where have you been? Rachel demanded. Mom said you got fired from the diner. Sarah, you can't keep doing this to yourself. When are you going to get it together? I didn't get fired, Sarah said calmly. Jesus Christ. What are you going to do now? You can't keep dragging Emma through this chaos. Maybe you should consider letting her stay with Mom for a while, just until. I'm not giving up my daughter, Sarah said, ice in her voice. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying be realistic. You bought a condemned building with your last dollar. You're homeless. You're unemployed. At some point, you have to think about what's best for Emma instead of your pride. Pride. Sarah almost laughed again. I appreciate your concern, Rachel. But we're fine. Better than fine. How are you possibly fine? You're living in a ruin. The ruin is going to be renovated. I've already hired contractors to start on it next month. Silence on the other end. Then with what money? My money. The building had some valuable materials. I sold them. Valuable materials. Rachel's skepticism dripped through the phone. Like what? Copper pipes. Something like that. Listen, I have to go. But we're okay. You don't need to worry about us anymore. Sarah, I'm trying to help you. I know. Thank you. Really. But I got it handled. She hung up before Rachel could respond. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline singing through her veins. That felt good. Standing up. Not apologizing. Not explaining. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them think whatever they wanted. Sarah knew the truth. She'd fallen as far as a person could fall. Hit the bottom so hard she'd shattered. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found the one thing that could put her back together. Not just money, though the money helped, but proof. Evidence that she wasn't a failure. That her instincts, her desperate leap of faith, had been right. She bought an abandoned power plant for $900. And she'd found a fortune. That evening, Sarah picked up Emma and took her to a real restaurant, not fast food, but a family place with cloth napkins and a menu that didn't have pictures. Emma's eyes went wide when Sarah told her to order whatever she wanted. Even dessert? Emma asked. Even dessert. They ate pasta and breadsticks and salad. Emma had ice cream with chocolate sauce. Sarah ordered a glass of wine, the first alcohol she'd had in over a year, and let herself feel the warmth of it spreading through her chest. Mommy, are we still poor? Emma asked over her melting ice cream. The question cracked something in Sarah's heart. No, baby, we're not poor anymore. Because you found the treasure? Because I found the treasure. Emma considered this, spooning ice cream thoughtfully. Like a pirate? Exactly like a pirate. They drove back to the power plant as the sun set, painting the broken building in gold and orange light. Tomorrow, Sarah would start the real work, hiring contractors, planning the renovation, transforming this ruin into something beautiful. She had the money now. The power plant could become anything she wanted. An art studio, a community center, a home. But tonight, they'd sleep one more night on the floor of the generator room, surrounded by the ghosts of fortune found and futures reclaimed. Sarah lay in her sleeping bag, Emma curled against her side, and stared at the shadows on the ceiling. She thought about the person who'd hidden that money so long ago. Had they died before they could retrieve it? Had they forgotten? Or had they simply moved on, leaving their past locked away for someone else to discover? She'd never know, but she was grateful. Whoever that person was, whatever their story, they'd saved Sarah's life. Saved Emma's future. Given them a second chance when the world had decided they deserved nothing. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the darkness, to the building, to fate or luck or whatever divine intervention had guided her to this place. The power plant didn't answer, but in the settling creaks and distant echoes, Sarah heard something like agreement. Like welcome. Like home. 6 months passed. The power plant transformed day by day, week by week. Sarah hired a contractor who specialized in historic restorations, a man who saw the building's bones and promised to make them beautiful again. She watched as crews cleaned decades of grime, replaced broken windows, repaired the roof, rewired the electrical systems. The generator room, where she'd found the safe, became the heart of the renovation. Sarah decided to preserve it partially, keeping the industrial aesthetic while making it functional. The safe itself she left in place, a monument to the day everything changed, polished until it gleamed, its door propped open to show it held no more secrets. Emma started a new school, a good one, with small classes and teachers who knew her name. She had an inhaler that was always full, new clothes that fit, friends who invited her to birthday parties. The cough that had rattled her chest for months faded, replaced by laughter that echoed through the renovated spaces. Sarah had told people she'd found valuable equipment in the building. Old generators sold for scrap, rare metals, industrial materials. Most people accepted the explanation. Those who didn't, who raised eyebrows or asked too many questions, Sarah simply smiled at and said nothing. Let them wonder. Let them doubt. She owed them nothing. No explanations. No apologies. No justification for her good fortune. The renovation took longer than expected. Historic buildings always did. But Sarah didn't mind. She had time now. Money. Patience. She worked alongside the contractors sometimes, learning about structural support and electrical systems, about what it took to breathe life into dead things. The power plant would never generate electricity again, but Sarah had other plans. The main floor became a community arts center, studios for local artists, a gallery space, a workshop for children's programs. The upper level converted to a modern, open apartment where Sarah and Emma would live, windows overlooking the river that ran beside the property. She kept the industrial aesthetic but made it warm, comfortable. Exposed brick and concrete, paired with soft textiles and careful lighting. A home that honored what the building had been while embracing what it had become. The grand opening was scheduled for late April, almost exactly 1 year after Sarah had bought the place. Invitations went out to community members, local officials, donors who'd contributed to the final renovations. Sarah had put the last of her fortune into making the center sustainable, creating an endowment that would fund operations for decades. $2.6 million. She'd spent carefully, saved intelligently, invested wisely. The lawyers and financial advisors she'd hired had structured everything to minimize taxes, maximize returns. After all expenses, Sarah still had close to $500,000 in secure accounts, more than enough to support her and Emma for years. But more than the money, more than the security, Sarah had given herself purpose. The power plant, once a monument to industrial decay, now stood as proof that discarded things could be valuable, that what society threw away might hold unexpected worth, that sometimes the unwanted piece nobody bid on turned out to be the treasure everyone had overlooked. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. The night before the opening, Sarah walked through the empty building, running her hand along walls she'd once thought would crush her. The place hummed with potential, with possibility. Tomorrow, it would fill with people. Children making art, musicians practicing, families gathering. All of this because she'd been desperate enough, or brave enough, or maybe just foolish enough to bet everything on a building everyone else had given up on. Sarah ended her walk in the generator room. The safe still stood in its corner, door open, interior empty but clean. She'd mounted a small plaque beside it. Within every discarded thing lives possibility. Mommy, Emma appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas for bed. Can we sleep here tonight? In our old room? One more time. Sarah smiled. Get your sleeping bag. They laid out their bags on the polished floor where they'd once slept on cold concrete. Emma chattered about school, about her friends, about the art project she was making for the center's opening. Her voice was bright, healthy, full of a security Sarah had been terrified she'd never be able to provide. "Mommy," Emma said quietly as they settled in for sleep. "Do you remember when we were poor?" "Yes, baby. I remember being scared." Sarah pulled her closer. "Me too. But you found the treasure and saved us." "I got lucky," Sarah said. "Very, very lucky." "I think you were brave," Emma said. "You bought this place when everyone said you were silly. And you were right and they were wrong." Sarah's eyes burned with tears. "Sometimes being brave just means not giving up. Then you're the bravest person I know." They fell asleep like that, mother and daughter, in the building that had witnessed their lowest moment and their greatest victory. The opening was beautiful. Hundreds of people came, filling the space with noise and laughter. Local officials gave speeches about community revitalization and second chances. Artists unveiled the work they'd created in the new studios. Children ran through the halls that had once been Sarah's nightmare, their joy erasing every shadow. Rachel came. She walked through the renovated building with wide eyes, occasionally touching walls as if to verify they were real. When she found Sarah in the main gallery, she just stared. "I don't understand," Rachel finally said. "How did you do this?" "I told you. The building had valuable materials." "Sarah, this is millions of dollars of renovation. What did you find?" Sarah smiled, calm and quiet. "Opportunity. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving." Rachel looked like she wanted to argue, to demand explanations, to make Sarah justify her success the way Sarah had always been forced to justify her failures. But something in Sarah's expression must have warned her off. "Well, it's beautiful. You did something amazing here. Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive before. I should have." "It's okay," Sarah said, and meant it. "We're okay now." Marcus showed up unexpectedly, hovering at the edge of the crowd, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah saw him before he saw her, watched him taking in the renovated space with something between confusion and resentment. When their eyes met, he approached cautiously. "Sarah, this is incredible. Thank you. I heard you bought this place for almost nothing. Everyone thought you'd lost your mind." "Everyone did." He laughed uncertainly. "Guess you showed them. How'd you pull this off? Did you get investors or something?" "Something like that. Must have been a hell of a pitch. Getting people to sink money into a condemned power plant." Sarah just smiled. Let him think whatever made him comfortable. He'd never believe the truth anyway. "Emma looks good," Marcus said, watching their daughter giggle with a group of children near the art installations. "Happy. She is. You're doing a good job with her." The admission seemed to cost him something. "Better than I gave you credit for." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "I am." He left shortly after, and Sarah felt nothing watching him go. No anger, no vindication, no need for him to know, to understand, to acknowledge what she'd accomplished. His opinion, his approval, didn't matter anymore. That night, after everyone left and the building fell quiet, Sarah stood alone in the generator room. The safe door still hung open, brass gleaming. She thought about closing it, locking away the past it represented. But no, let stand open. Let remind her that treasures hide in unexpected places, that sometimes the thing everyone overlooks holds exactly what you need. She'd started this journey homeless and hopeless, her last $900 bet on a building everyone called worthless. And she'd won, not just financially, though the money had saved them, but she'd won back something deeper, her belief that she deserved good things, that her judgment could be trusted, that she wasn't fundamentally broken. The power plant stood around her, no longer decaying, no longer forgotten. Restored, reclaimed, given new purpose. Just like Sarah herself. 18 months after finding the fortune, Sarah stood in her renovated apartment on the power plant's second floor, morning coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the river. Emma was still asleep, safe and warm in her bedroom that had furniture, decorations, everything a 7-year-old girl should have. Below, the community center thrummed with quiet life. Early morning painters setting up, a yoga class in the main gallery, the coffee shop in the old control room, just opening for business. Sarah had put nearly everything into making this place sustainable. The money from the safe had bought them security, yes, but more importantly, it had bought them purpose. The center employed 18 people. It hosted programs for at-risk youth, provided studio space for struggling artists, ran free workshops for anyone who walked through the door. The building that had been left to rot now gave life to hundreds of people. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from her mother, something she'd learned to expect now that Sarah's success had become undeniable. Saw the article in the paper about the center. Very impressive. You've done well for yourself. Let's have lunch soon. No apology for her earlier words, for telling Sarah she was making a mistake, for suggesting Emma would be better off elsewhere. Just casual pride, as if she'd supported Sarah all along. Sarah deleted the message. Some relationships couldn't be renovated. Some damage was too deep. And Sarah had learned she didn't need everyone's approval. She'd save herself and Emma. That was enough. She heard Emma stirring and went to wake her for school. Her daughter smiled sleepily. No trace of the fear that used to haunt her eyes. They had breakfast together in their kitchen with its modern appliances and full refrigerator. Then Sarah drove Emma to school in the 3-year-old sedan she'd bought with cash. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would draw attention. Sarah had learned to live comfortably but quietly. Most people who knew her story thought she'd gotten lucky with the building's salvage value. Only Sarah, her lawyer, and her financial advisor knew the truth about the safe's contents. And Sarah intended to keep it that way. After dropping Emma at school, Sarah returned to the power plant. She had a meeting with a grant committee interested in funding an expansion, additional studio space for a music program. The center was growing, thriving. Sarah had discovered she had a talent for this work, for taking broken things and making them beautiful. She walked through the generator room on her way to her office, as she did every morning. The safe stood in its corner, door open, a reminder of the day that changed everything. Sometimes tourists visited specifically to see it. The famous safe from the power plant renovation story. They take photos, ask questions about what was found inside. Sarah always smiled and said the same thing, exactly what I needed. Let them interpret that however they wanted. At noon, Sarah took her lunch break by the river, sitting on the renovated dock where old equipment had once been loaded. The water ran dark and cold, peaceful. She thought about the journey from desperation to this moment. How close she'd come to giving up. How many times she'd questioned whether she could keep going. 1.5 years ago, she'd been sleeping on a concrete floor with her daughter, both of them cold and scared and running out of options. She'd been ridiculed, pitted, abandoned by the people who should have supported her. And now, she sat in sunlight, watching the river flow, knowing Emma was safe at a good school, knowing their future was secure, knowing she'd built something that would outlast her. Something meaningful. The safe's fortune had given her money. But more importantly, it had given her time. Time to heal. Time to plan. Time to become the person she'd always had the potential to be before life had beaten her down. Sarah finished her lunch and returned to work. She had families to serve, artists to support, programs to run. The power plant hummed around her, alive again, purposeful again. Just before closing time, a young woman arrived at the center's front desk, timid and uncertain. Sarah happened to be passing through and noticed her distress. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked. The woman looked close to tears. "I saw your ad for the studio scholarships, but I don't know if I qualify. I'm living out of my car right now. I don't have much, but I used to paint before everything fell apart, and I need something, something to remind me I'm not completely broken." Sarah's throat tightened. She saw herself in this woman's eyes, that desperate hope barely holding on. "Come with me," Sarah said gently. She led the woman through the center, showing her the studios, the equipment, the resources available. She explained the scholarship program, designed specifically for people in difficult situations. No applications, no proving worthiness, just need and desire to create. "You can start tomorrow if you want," Sarah said. "Studio time, materials, everything you need." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Why? You don't even know me." Sarah smiled. "I know what it's like to need a chance. To have everyone count you out. To feel like you're drowning and nobody cares. How did you get through it?" "I got lucky," Sarah said. "Very lucky. But also, I didn't give up. Even when giving up seemed like the only logical choice, I kept going." The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I think I do, Sarah said quietly. She watched the woman leave, already planning when she'd return, already imagining what she might create. Another person given a chance. Another life, potentially changed by this building that had once been abandoned and forgotten. That night, Sarah stood in the generator room one more time, as had become her ritual. The safe door hung open, empty but expectant. She ran her hand over the smooth metal, this vessel that had held her salvation. Thank you, she whispered, as she did every night. Thank you to whoever had hidden that fortune. Thank you to fate for guiding her here. Thank you to her own stubborn refusal to quit, even when quitting was the obvious choice. Emma appeared in the doorway. Mommy? What are you doing? Just saying good night to the building. Emma smiled, used her mother's quirks. Does it say good night back? Always. They climbed the stairs to their apartment together, and Sarah tucked Emma into bed with clean sheets and a full belly and medication she never had to worry about affording. Mommy, Emma said sleepily, are we going to live here forever? Would you like that? Yeah, I like it here. It feels safe. Safe. Sarah's eyes burned. Then we'll stay as long as you want, baby. Emma fell asleep quickly, and Sarah sat in her living room, looking out over the center she'd built. Lights glowed in studio windows where artists worked late. The coffee shop was closing, its employees laughing as they cleaned. Life, purpose, community, all of it grown from seeds planted in desperation and watered with impossible luck. Sarah's phone buzzed. An email from the grant committee. Funding approved for the expansion. The music program could begin next year. She smiled, exhaustion and satisfaction mixing into something close to peace. The power plant that everyone had thrown away had become her triumph. The $900 gamble had paid off beyond anything she could have imagined. Not just in money, though the money had been crucial, but in proving that her instincts mattered, that she could trust herself, that sometimes the thing nobody else wants is exactly what you need. Sarah finished her wine and went to bed, surrounded by the walls she'd saved and that had saved her in return. She'd been homeless, hopeless, counted out, and she found a fortune in the ruins of her last desperate choice. Let that be the lesson. Let that be the story. Not just of luck, though luck played its part, but of refusing to surrender, of seeing value where others see waste, of believing, even in the darkest moment, that tomorrow might hold something better. Sarah had bought an abandoned power plant for $900, and she found everything she needed hidden in its heart. The generator room safe had held $267 million worth of secrets. But more than that, it had held proof that sometimes, when you're brave enough or desperate enough or foolish enough to bet everything on yourself, the universe bets on you right back. Sarah Mitchell fell asleep in her renovated apartment, her daughter safe beside her, her future secure, her past transformed from tragedy to triumph. And somewhere in the darkness, the power plant settled around them, no longer forgotten, no longer broken, but alive again with purpose and possibility. Just like the woman who had refused to give up on it. Just like the fortune that had been waiting all along for someone brave enough to look. 3 years after finding the fortune, Sarah stood at the podium of the National Historic Preservation Conference, her hand steady on the microphone despite the hundreds of eyes watching her. The power plant renovation had won awards, been featured in architectural magazines, become a case study in adaptive reuse. And now, she'd been invited to speak about her success. When I bought the Riverside Power Plant for $900, she began, everyone thought I'd made the worst decision of my life. Polite laughter rippled through the audience. They didn't know how true that statement was, how close she'd been to complete collapse, how the building had been her last desperate throw of the dice. What I learned, she continued, is that value exists in unexpected places. Sometimes the things society discards hold exactly what someone needs. My building needed me, and I needed it. After her speech, people swarmed her with questions, business cards, requests for consulting work. A developer from Chicago wanted her advice on a similar project. A foundation director asked if she'd consider franchising her community center model. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell her story. Sarah smiled, answered questions, collected cards. But she kept the real story locked away. The safe, the fortune, the impossible luck that had saved her. That remained her secret, shared only with those who needed to know. Emma was 10 now, thriving in ways Sarah had once thought impossible. Straight A's in school, art classes at the center, friends who came over for sleepovers in their apartment above the gallery spaces. A childhood that looked normal, stable, secure. No trace of the terror they'd survived together. Sometimes Sarah watched her daughter and felt overwhelmed by gratitude, so intense it hurt. She'd gotten Emma out, given her a future. That alone made everything worthwhile. The community center had expanded twice now. The music program was in full swing, 40 students learning instruments they'd never have been able to afford otherwise. The art studios stayed booked months in advance. They'd added a theater space, a dance studio, classrooms for adult education. The power plant wasn't just a building anymore. It was an ecosystem, a proof of concept, a demonstration that investing in discarded things, including discarded people, could transform entire communities. Sarah had used the last of her fortune carefully. Trust funds for Emma's education, through graduate school if she wanted. A nest egg that would ensure they'd never be desperate again. The rest had gone into the endowment, structured to fund operations perpetually through smart investments and careful management. She lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. A nice car, but not a luxury one. Good clothes, but not designer. Vacations, but nothing ostentatious. She'd learned that the best wealth was invisible wealth, the kind that didn't invite questions or jealousy or suspicion. Most people who knew her story believed she'd gotten moderate insurance money after the renovation revealed the building's actual value, or that she'd found investors who believed in her vision, or that grants and donations had funded everything. Sarah encouraged these beliefs with careful vagueness, never quite confirming or denying, letting people construct whatever narrative made them comfortable. Only 3 people knew the full truth. Her lawyer, who'd helped navigate the complex process of claiming the old bonds and certificates. Her financial advisor, who'd structured everything to minimize taxes and maximize long-term security. And Emma, who'd been there when the safe opened, who'd seen her mother's hands shake as she counted impossible wealth. Keep it secret, Sarah had told Emma years ago. People treat you differently when they know you have money, and some people would want to take it from us. Emma, wise beyond her years from their time of struggle, understood. She never told friends at school, never bragged or hinted. The fortune remained their shared secret, the foundation everything else was built on, but invisible to the world. Sarah's phone rang as she left the conference. Rachel. They spoke occasionally now, polite conversations that never went deep. Rachel had finally gotten pregnant, was raising twin boys, worked part-time as a realtor. Their lives had diverged so completely that finding common ground took effort. "Hey," Rachel said when Sarah answered. "I saw your speech got posted online. Very impressive." "Thanks. Listen, I was wondering. Derek's business is struggling a bit. He's in construction, you know. I thought maybe, with all your renovation projects, you might be able to throw some work his way." And there it was. The ask. It always came eventually, once people realized Sarah had resources. The relatives who'd abandoned her when she was desperate now circled back, hands out, smiles tight. "I use specialized restoration contractors," Sarah said evenly. "Historic preservation requires specific certifications." "Right, but surely you need regular construction too." "Derek's very good. He could give you a discount." Sarah wanted to laugh. A discount, as if that was the currency of family obligation. "I'll keep in mind." "Sarah, come on. We're family. I'd help you if you needed it." "Would you?" Sarah thought. "Would you really? Because I needed help 3 years ago, and you told me you needed your space." But she didn't say that. No point in old arguments. "I'll see what I can do, Rachel." But no promises. They hung up, and Sarah deleted the call from her history. Some relationships were better kept at arm's length. Love from a distance was safer than intimacy that came with conditions. That evening, Sarah returned to the power plant. Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, one of those normal childhood experiences Sarah had once thought they'd never have. The building was quiet, most activities finished for the day. Sarah walked through the empty spaces, running her hand along walls she'd saved. The generator room drew her, as it always did. The safe stood in its corner, door open, interior gleaming. She'd had it professionally restored and preserved, the brass polished, the mechanism serviced, the interior lined with velvet. A plaque beside it now detailed the building's history, carefully edited to exclude certain details about what the safe had contained. Sarah stood before it, remembering the desperation of that first day, the impossible hope, the moment the door had swung open and revealed salvation. "You changed everything," she whispered to the empty metal cavity. Footsteps echoed behind her. Sarah turned to find Detective Morrison, an older man with kind eyes and a reputation for thoroughness. Her heart skipped. She'd always feared this moment, that someone would investigate, would ask questions about the fortune's origins. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, "sorry to bother you after hours. The front desk said I could find you here. What can I do for you, Detective?" He smiled, disarming. "Nothing criminal, I promise. I'm actually here about a cold case. Missing persons from 1987. Man named Gerald Howards, worked as an accountant for the power company. Disappeared right before the plant closed. His daughter hired me to look into it, see if I could find anything new." Sarah's mouth went dry. "I don't see how I can help. I bought this building 3 years ago. Whatever happened in 1987? I know, long before your time. But I'm re-interviewing anyone connected to the property, seeing if anything shakes loose. You haven't found any personal effects, old papers, anything that might relate to employees?" Sarah thought of the safe, the canvas bag, the carefully hidden fortune. "Nothing like that. Mostly just industrial equipment." Morrison nodded, pulling out a photograph. "This is Gerald Howards, 43 years old when he vanished. Wife said he'd been acting strange for weeks, nervous, secretive. Then one day, he just didn't come home." The photo showed a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous smile. Sarah studied it, trying to feel nothing, reveal nothing. Some theories suggested he embezzled from the company. Morrison continued. Others thought he witnessed something he shouldn't have. The plant was going under, lots of shady last-minute transfers of assets. Maybe Gerald knew where the bodies were buried, so to speak. "I'm sorry about his family," Sarah said carefully. "But I really don't have any information." Morrison tucked the photo away. "Well, if you come across anything, give me a call." He handed her a card. "Sometimes old buildings hold on to secrets. You never know what might turn up." He left, and Sarah stood frozen, Morrison's words echoing. Old buildings hold on to secrets. The safe had held Gerald Howard's secret. She was certain of it now. An accountant who disappeared when the plant closed. A fortune hidden in a secure location. The timeline fit too perfectly. Had he stolen the money, planning to retrieve it later? Had someone killed him for it? Had he simply run, leaving his family behind, his hidden wealth waiting for a future that never came? Sarah would never know. But she thought about Gerald Howard's daughter, still searching for answers decades later, still wondering what had happened to her father. And Sarah, who'd benefited from whatever choice or tragedy had left that fortune unclaimed, felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders. She'd taken something that didn't belong to her. Legally, as the property owner, she had every right to whatever was found on the premises. But morally, ethically, if that money had been stolen, if Gerald Howard's disappearance was connected to it, did Sarah have an obligation to his family? The question haunted her as she locked up the building and drove home. 3 years of security, of rebuilding, of creating something beautiful, all of it potentially built on someone else's tragedy. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat in her living room, staring at the city lights reflected on the river, wrestling with her conscience. The money was gone, spent, invested, transformed into buildings and programs and Emma's future. There was no getting it back, no returning it. But was there something else she could do? Some way to honor the possibility that her fortune had been Gerald Howard's stolen dream? By morning, Sarah had made a decision. She called her lawyer. "I want to set up a scholarship fund," she said, "for children of missing persons. Fully funded, perpetual. Start with $1 million endowment." Her lawyer was silent for a moment. "Sarah, That's a significant commitment. I know, but it matters. People who lose family members to disappearances, they struggle in ways most people don't understand. Financial stress, emotional trauma. I want to help. This is about that detective's visit yesterday, isn't it? Sarah had told her lawyer about Morrison's questions. Maybe, but it's also the right thing to do. The Gerald Howard's Memorial Scholarship was established a month later. Sarah named it after the missing accountant, a small acknowledgement of the connection she couldn't prove but felt in her bones. If his family ever learned about it, they'd know someone remembered, someone cared. It didn't erase the moral ambiguity of her situation, but it helped. Emma came home from school one day with a project assignment. "We have to write about our heroes," she said. "I'm writing about you." Sarah's chest tightened. "I'm not a hero, baby." "Yes, you are. You saved us when we had nothing. You built this whole place. You help people every day. That's what heroes do." "Heroes don't just get lucky," Sarah said quietly. Emma tilted her head, studying her mother. "Is that what you think happened? That you just got lucky?" "Partly. But you had to be brave first. You bought this place when everyone said it was stupid. You worked to fix it. You didn't give up even when things were really hard. The lucky part just gave you the chance. You did the rest. Out of the mouths of children." Sarah hugged Emma tight, surprised by how much she needed to hear that. The guilt about Gerald Howard's had been eating at her, making her question everything. But Emma was right. The fortune had given her an opportunity. What she'd built with it was her own accomplishment. Still, she called Detective Morrison that evening. "I've been thinking about your case. I'd like to contribute to a reward fund, if the family wants to establish one, for information leading to answers about what happened to Gerald Howard's." Morrison sounded surprised. "That's generous of you, Ms. Mitchell. May I ask why?" "This building was part of his life. Maybe his story connects to it somehow. I want to help his family find closure. I'll let them know. They'll be grateful." Sarah hung up feeling lighter. It wasn't enough, could never be enough if her suspicions were correct. But it was something, a gesture toward balance, toward justice, toward honoring the possibility that her miracle had been someone else's tragedy. The scholarship fund and the reward contribution cost Sarah nearly a quarter of her remaining personal fortune. She didn't regret it. Money was supposed to do good in the world. And if some of that good could flow back toward the source, even indirectly, that felt right. For years after finding the fortune, Sarah received a letter from Gerald Howard's daughter, Catherine. It was handwritten on cream-colored stationery, the penmanship careful and elegant. "Dear Ms. Mitchell," it began, "Detective Morrison told me about your generous contributions toward finding answers about my father's disappearance. I cannot express how much it means to know that someone cares after all these years. Most people have forgotten him, moved on, but our family has never stopped wondering. Your scholarship in his name, your reward fund, these gestures have given us renewed hope that we might finally learn the truth. Whether or not we ever get answers, please know that your kindness has mattered deeply. With gratitude, Catherine Howardson." Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. She'd done the right thing. Not perfect justice, maybe, but something. She wrote back, keeping her response carefully vague about her connection to the case. "Your father worked in a building that's now helping hundreds of people. In a way, his legacy continues through that. I hope you find the peace you're searching for." They corresponded occasionally after that, polite letters about nothing important. Catherine never asked probing questions about why Sarah cared. Sarah never volunteered information. But a connection formed, fragile and strange, between the woman whose father had disappeared and the woman who'd found what might have been his secret. The community center continued to grow. Sarah hired a full staff, stepped back from daily operations, became more of a visionary director than a hands-on manager. She started consulting with other cities looking to replicate her model. The work was fulfilling, meaningful, the kind of purpose she'd never imagined having during those desperate days sleeping on concrete floors. Emma was 12 now, confident and creative, already talking about architecture school, about designing buildings that help people. Sarah's heart swelled watching her daughter dream big dreams, unencumbered by the fear that had defined Sarah's own youth. "You can be anything you want," Sarah told her. "We have the resources now. Whatever you need to pursue your dreams, we'll make it happen. I want to be like you, Emma said simply. Building things that matter. The power plant had become more than Sarah's redemption. It had become Emma's inspiration, a living lesson that discarded things could be valuable, that patience and vision could transform decay into beauty, that the stuff everyone else overlooked might be exactly what the world needed. On the 5th anniversary of purchasing the building, Sarah threw a celebration. 5 years since the $900 purchase that had changed everything. The center hosted a massive party, free and open to the community. Musicians performed. Artists displayed work. Food vendors lined the parking lot. Thousands of people came. Sarah stood on the deck overlooking the river, watching families laugh and children play, seeing the life she'd breathed into this forgotten place. A reporter approached, asking for an interview. "How does it feel," the reporter asked, "to see what you've built here?" "Surreal," Sarah said honestly. 5 years ago, I was at my lowest point. I made what looked like the stupidest decision of my life. And somehow it worked out. What would you say to people facing similar desperation? Sarah thought carefully. Don't give up. Even when every logical voice tells you to quit, even when you're out of options and the future looks impossible, don't give up. Sometimes the thing nobody else values is exactly what you need. Sometimes the crazy gamble pays off. Sometimes the universe gives back when you've given everything. The reporter smiled. That's inspiring. Sarah glanced toward the generator room, visible through large windows. The safe stood in its corner, door open, a monument to possibility. I got lucky, she said, but I also showed up. I did the work. I believed when believing seemed insane. That matters too. That night, after everyone left and the building fell quiet, Sarah made her ritual visit to the generator room. She did this less often now, didn't need the reassurances frequently, but tonight felt significant. 5 years. She stood before the safe, running her hand over its cool metal surface. Thank you, she whispered as always, for everything you gave me, for saving us. The building creaked around her, settling, breathing. Sarah smiled. She'd come to think of the power plant as alive, in its way. A guardian that had protected its secret until the right person stumbled through its doors. A being that had chosen her, as much as she'd chosen it. Footsteps echoed behind her. Emma, who'd fallen asleep on a couch upstairs, appeared rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, what are you doing?" "Just saying thank you." Emma came and stood beside her, looking at the safe. "Do you ever wish we could tell people the real story? About what you found?" "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "But the real story is complicated. People wouldn't understand. They'd judge, or they'd want something, or they'd make it ugly. This way, we get to keep the magic private." The detective never found out what happened to Mr. Howard's, Emma said quietly. She knew the story now, the suspicion Sarah had, the guilt and the gift. No, but his family got some closure from knowing people still cared. And the scholarship has helped 23 kids so far. That's something. Do you think the money was his? I think it might have been. I'll never know for sure. But if it was, I hope I've honored it. Used it to do what he might have wanted. Help people. Build something that lasts. Emma leaned against her mother. You're a good person, Mom. I try to be. It's not always easy. They stood together in the generator room, mother and daughter, looking at the empty safe that had once held their salvation. Outside, the river flowed dark and constant. The city lights glimmered. The world turned on, indifferent to individual struggles and triumphs. But here, in this building that had been forgotten and reclaimed, Sarah and Emma had carved out something permanent. Proof that the discarded could be valuable. That the desperate gamble could pay off. That sometimes, when you had nothing left to lose, betting everything on yourself was the only winning move. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her financial advisor. Your portfolio hit the benchmark you set. Between investments and the building's appreciated value, you've successfully rebuilt the original fortune. Congratulations. She stared at the message. Through careful management and smart investments, through the building's increasing property value and the success of her consulting work, Sarah had essentially replaced the money she'd spent. Not the full $2.6 million, but close enough. $1.5 million in liquid assets, plus the building worth at least another million, probably more. She'd been poor. She'd gotten rich through impossible luck. She'd spent that wealth on purpose and redemption. And through work and wisdom, she'd build it back. The cycle felt complete somehow. Full circle. "Emma," Sarah said softly, "we're going to be okay. No matter what happens, we're going to be okay." "I know, Mommy. We've been okay for a long time now." And they had. 5 years of okay. 5 years of security and purpose and slowly healing from the trauma of desperation. 5 years of building something that mattered. Sarah locked up the building and drove Emma home through quiet streets. Their apartment waited, warm and safe. Everything a home should be. Emma went to bed easily, a child who slept soundly because her world was stable. Sarah sat by the window, looking out at the power plant's silhouette against the night sky. The building she'd bought for $900. The ruin everyone had scorned. The last desperate choice of a woman with no options. It had saved her. Saved Emma. Given them everything. Not just the money, though the money had been crucial, but the belief. The proof that Sarah's instincts could be trusted. That she wasn't fundamentally broken. That the thing everyone else overlooked could be the exact right choice. She pulled out her old journal, the one she'd kept during the worst days, when they'd been sleeping on floors and eating crackers for dinner. She read her own desperate handwriting. "I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I have to try. I have to believe something good can come from this." Something good had come. Something miraculous. Sarah added a new entry, 5 years later. "We made it. The building I bought with my last dollar became everything I needed. The safe held more than money. It held hope. And that hope has grown into something beautiful. Emma is thriving. The community center serves hundreds. We're secure. We're happy. We're home. The fortune saved us. But I like to think I saved it too. Gave it purpose. Used it for good. Maybe that's what treasure is supposed to do. Not just sit hidden away, but circulate, heal, build." Gerald Howards, wherever you are, whatever your story, thank you. Your secret became my miracle, and I've tried to honor that every day since. She closed the journal and put away. Some stories were too personal for anyone else to read. This was hers and Emma's, locked in their hearts like the fortune had been locked in the safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new people to help. The community center would open its doors, and life would flow through the spaces she'd created. Sarah would continue her work, building and helping and proving that discarded things could have value. But tonight, she simply sat in gratitude for the impossible luck, for the courage to take the chance, for the building that had held exactly what she needed, waiting patiently through decades for the right person to find it. Sarah Mitchell had bought an abandoned power plant for $900. And inside, hidden in a safe nobody else had noticed, she'd found not just money, but redemption. Not just wealth, but worth. Not just security, but proof that she deserved good things. The fortune had been $267 million in old currency, bonds, gold, and jewels. But its true value was immeasurable. It had given Sarah back herself. And that was the greatest treasure of all. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.